Okay, my clock says it's 7 o'clock. I'd like to bring the March 12th, 2024 Planning Board meeting to order. Karen, if you could take roll call, please.
Claudia Bolden.
Here.
Jim Callahan.
Here.
Kevin Donovan.
Here.
Dave Edmonds.
Here.
Alan Turner.
Here.
Mike Ventresca.
Here.
Chair Bob Doherty.
Here. Before the meeting begins, please silence your cell phones and note that this meeting is being recorded. And before we get started with the general business of this meeting, Claudia would like to say a few words.
So today, the planning board says goodbye officially to our planning board director, Tina Cassidy, who has been in this role for exactly 10 years. You started in March of 2014. And Tina is the sort that does not want a party. She does not want parting remarks, but she's graciously allowed me to give a couple of thoughts on Tina's last meeting. So on behalf of the planning board and on behalf of Karen, we wanted to just give you a few pats on the back for the job that you've done here for us and for the city of Woburn for the last 10 years. So first of all, I would like to give you a pat on the back for how knowledgeable you are about planning and how intelligent and smart you are as a person. Those two things have made our job as members so much easier. You are a wealth of knowledge for Karen and passionate about your job for all of us. And for that's the first pat on the back. The second pat on the back is how well prepared you are for each and every planning board meeting. As members, we come in every 2 weeks and we try our best to do what's right for the city, for the residents, for the applicants. But without careful preparation and the planning board director seeing the problems beforehand and trying her best to solve them before we even get to them, our meetings would be much, much longer and more involved than they are. So for the past 10 years, we've had someone running interference for us in a serious, serious way so that when we get to these meetings, we have everything organized, we are well prepared to make the best decisions possible for the city, for the residents, and for the applicants in front of us. I am told by Karen, and I believe this to be true, that you have both an incredible memory and that you love to proofread. So those two things, I have to say, boy, I have neither of them. So thank you for what you've brought on those points. The third pat on the back is how dedicated you are to serving the community and helping us serve the community. You are unfailingly welcoming to neighbors and residents. You help applicants out all the time, and we always feel that the information that's coming into us is the necessary information for all of us as members to make the best decisions. And that feels really, really solid from this seat, that we feel that you've given us the tools to do the best job we can for the projects in front of us, for the problems that we need to solve. Karen has made very clear that in terms of budgeting, you never wasted one penny of taxpayers' money and always tried to give money back at the end of the year. So coming in, doing all of this and coming in under budget, you can't really ask for more. The last thing I'll say, and you're doing an excellent job sitting through this. Thank you, Tina. Good job. The last thing I'll say is that you have been a real joy to work with. For all of us members, and for Karen as well, that you have a wicked sense of humor, which is much, much, much appreciated. And you are so generous with your time and attention to your work, as well as whatever personal issues come up with board members or with staff. And for all of that, Tina, I would just like to say, we wish you the very, very, very best in your retirement. We are sad to see you go, but we're sad for us and extremely happy for you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, thank you all very much.
See, that wasn't so bad.
No, and I managed not to cry, which is wonderful, because I thought I might get a little weepy. Thank you. I have thoroughly enjoyed my career, and your kind words tonight are the best retirement gift I could ask for. Thank you.
Do we have to go on with the meeting? Or?
Yeah, well, let's try to keep it to a short one.
All right, ask.
Thank you.
Okay, first thing up is a subdivision approval not required, 46 Fowle Street.
I don't know if we have anybody here this evening representing it. It's an A&R plan that hopes to consolidate 2 lots into one. It's property that's located at 46 to 48 Fowle Street. And on the plan in front of you, it would combine Lot 2 with Parcel A, which is also Lot A, to get a new lot, a combined lot of 26,882 square feet. It is an existing parcel, a lot consolidation. We've reviewed it. It meets all of the board's requirements for endorsement as an A&R, and staff would therefore recommend that you endorse it as such.
Anything from the board?
Motion to accept.
Motion by Dave to accept the director's recommendation, seconded by Jim. All those in favor? 7-0. Up next under public hearings, 0 Marcy Street definitive subdivision plan. And we are ready to go.
Thank you, sir. Give me 1 second. Sorry about that. Good evening. My name is Michael Avaney with Cummings Properties. With me this evening is Mark Slager, Principal, Allen Engineering. We're here representing Commonwealth Realty Foundation for the benefit of the Cummings Foundation. Thank you all for having us again this evening. As some of you may remember, we are seeking to construct a single-family home on a lot in an R2 zoning district. There are some waivers that we can talk about later. Up on the screen is the latest plan that we recently submitted to the planning board, or a package that we submitted to the planning board. Give you a little bit of history. As you recall, we were last here on January 9th, and before then we were here on November 14th. Between those times, we had a site visit on the site with the board and the neighbors. Since the 9th, with the support of the planning board and planning director Cassidy, we submitted an application and brought the project to the Board of Appeals on February 21st. The reason for the Board of Appeals application and meeting was to seek a lot variance, thereby allowing the applicant to deed Lot 2 to the city in the interest of preserving the vegetated buffer in perpetuity. Obviously not prepared. So we had to get it, we were asking to get we were seeking a variance request, seeking relief from the required lot area from 12,000 square feet to 8,370 square feet. In what might have been an unprecedented event at that Board of Appeals meeting, both Planning Director Cassidy and Member Bolgen came, attended the meeting, and shared what we have all been collectively working towards for the last many months. We continued the Board of Appeals hearing, confident that eventually we would get the variance that we seek. The board chair, actually, the reason why it didn't go that evening is because the board chair requested that we draft some conditions. So we continued the meeting, and in the meantime, there was some momentum for the project, so we thought maybe we could get it back in front of this board. Seems like we're gonna get through the zoning board with the desired goal. We thought we'd get back in front of this board to kind of clean up this matter potentially. While Tina was still here, she worked pretty hard to help us. Thank you. So we thought we'd try to move that forward. We've revised the plans and provided draft conditions that are associated with this latest package. If approved by this board, we will be back in front of the Board of Appeals on April 10th. So whatever happens here potentially could be conditioned that it would also receive Board of Appeals approval. For clarification, the approval of this project, again, we can't move forward with this project unless the Board of Appeals also approves it. With that, again, this is the revised plan. This is the plan showing the lot as it exists. It's highlighted now. It's actually all one lot. This is the drainage and utility plan. Let me just skip forward to here. This is really what we're talking about, right? So we're looking to extend Marcy Street 27 feet. I think last time we were here, we were thinking about 15 feet. In the meantime, I've spoken to DPW Superintendent Duran, and he wanted to make sure that there was enough space beyond the driveway line right here that they could push the snow, that they had, good 20 feet or so beyond the driveway. That was his request. So we tweaked that accordingly. He's also asked for a few other things that you can see in the letter that he's provided. And there's nothing else here that's too out of the ordinary. We'll extend it. We're going to put two new catch basins in. We're going to put a concrete leaching chamber in to handle the additional stormwater from this additional piece of pavement. So the biggest challenge that we faced here, not the biggest challenge, but one of the biggest concerns by the neighborhood was the buffer, and the fact of the matter is, but for preserving the buffer, we could have done this alternatively with just coming here and asking to run Marcy Street through. But in deference to the neighbors, we all have a common goal to preserve the buffer. So how are we proposing to do that? We will look to this piece of Lot 2. We look to spin these two lots off. Lot 2 would be deeded to the city, and these 23 evergreen trees would remain. If anybody's been down here recently, everybody has, hopefully, there's a row of 23 evergreen trees. 18 of them are over 12 inches, 5 of them are under 12 inches. Marcy Street is filled with deciduous trees, and those would like to remain, but for the 10 small, and they're really kind of scrubby, and you can't see it on this screen, but the plans that you have, there's some pretty small ones. Maybe there's one 15-inch one, I think, but the rest of them are pretty small. So the whole objective here is to subdivide this lot, give this lot to the city, and make sure that this remains a vegetated buffer. Now, the challenge we started out with was, when we left, we wanted to be able to deed this to the city and deed this piece to the city. We actually, in the few weeks that we've been working on this project since then, we've been unable to find a way that makes sense or is legally right for us to actually give away ownership rights to the private way on Marcy Street. We don't have a fee owner. We're not a fee owner of that. The rights travel with the lot, but we don't really own that piece of Marcy Street. So what we've proposed in the conditions was, much like we talked about at the very beginning, while we'll give away Lot 2 for sure, the Marcy Street, the rights on Marcy Street that are now controlled by this lot and subsequent, a lot over here that's held under common ownership, we will cede those rights for a conservation easement, and I think that's the language that we used in the proposed conditions. Again, we don't own it, we can't give it away if we don't own it. We also want to make sure that whatever we do doesn't queer everybody else's ability to pass and repass there. So, based on what we learned from our lawyer, our counsel, this was the best way to handle it. There's just some details there, construction details. And again, this is the goal, right? To give away the piece in green and turn Area A into an easement area. At that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions at the moment? Jim?
The letter or the bullet point that Karen handed out.
That was the, excuse me if you wouldn't mind, that was the email, Mike, that you sent to me last Thursday outlining the proposed conditions you drafted for the ZBA.
Yes.
Sorry, Jim.
Got him, thank you.
So the bullet point 3, city will convey an 18-foot parking easement for the adjoining properties, Judkin properties. It's currently paved now, that they already have the beneficial use of. Is that what we're talking about, that area?
Yep, it's this area right in here. It's the part of Lot 2 that's paved right now that has historically been paved and used as parking.
That's around, what, 2,800 feet plus or minus of that proposed lot proposal that's going to
Correct.
be conveyed to the city. The concern that the neighbors had was to give them a good buffer. And I believe the last time we were here, I was of the opinion that arborvitae's or something to enhance that density of greenery to give them a stronger buffer zone along that strip would have been more than sufficient. Where it's being used currently, I know that similar ownership, but it is part of Lot 2. What's the benefit to the city to give up that lot instead of planting greenery to benefit the neighborhood? And I'm trying to understand where this came from, where it was not discussed at the planning board. And I'd be surprised if it was discussed at the zoning board, where that came up to fruition, to make it to the point of interest for this evening.
Good? Yeah, I don't remember ever talking about adding any plantings here, and our intention all along was to be able to preserve that parking there. As a matter of fact, and maybe some of the neighbors will come up and discuss this, they had preferred that, they knew that we were parking here. We've been parking here historically since that building was built in the 70s. If we don't have the opportunity to continue to use those spaces, people are just gonna park on the street. And that was what the neighbors were concerned about. And it's potential that you might hear that later this evening. I don't recall us ever discussing enhancing the buffer. I think leaving the very, very nice buffer that's there now is more than enough. There's also fences. There's also a nice big fence that runs all the way along there, 6-foot fence. So that was our intention. Our intention was never really to lose the parking, or the ability to have the parking. That does benefit, as you mentioned, next door.
I'm not sure that the parking was ever discussed as a proposal when this was one lot instead of two, for the adjoining property owner to have a right to it. It was a corner lot with 3 fronts, right? We got by that, we had water issues, we had drainage issues, and we had the interest of the neighbors not wanting to continue Marcy Street. And I concur with most of their concerns, One of the concerns that I definitely did hear was the lights of the vehicles that are parking head-on going down there, and if they get chased out by the police, they parked over on Erie Street, and they blocked their driveways. I heard both those concerns, not just the parking on Erie Street. So my concern to try and satisfy this condition is to try and deepen the density of the greenery in there so they don't have to deal with this. I do believe that this is probably your best proposal, but I don't see where the interest of the parking comes in for a single lot. I'll hang up on it, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. This is a public hearing, so if anybody in the audience would like to come up and speak either for or against this particular proposal, and please give your name and address, and then sign the sheet of paper there on your way out. Okay. Looks like we have nobody that wants to come up and speak. Anything else from the board? David?
Would it be appropriate to close the public hearing?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would say that would be a
I
good.
make a motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
Motion by Dave to close the public hearing, second by Claudia. All those in favor? All those opposed? 5-0 carries, 2 abstentions. On the matter itself, if there is no more discussion amongst the board members, Tina, do you have a recommendation?
I do, I think,
Excuse me,
I'd
Jim.
like, through the chair, yes, Member Plogan, was there anything that came up during the zoning board meeting in regards to this 18-foot strip?
Nope. I think what the applicant may not have, to your point, the zoning board of appeals simply wanted conditions written. They did not discuss conditions that could be written. They, having been at the meeting, I think what they would probably prefer is that we as a board go first and set conditions. And then they, as a board, can decide whether to grant the variance for that lot and incorporate our conditions. That was my sort of takeaway from the meeting, that they would rather us dealt with the conditions than they. So there weren't specific conditions discussed there. So that's the short answer, Jim.
Still just, I guess I'm looking for some enlightenment how this condition came to fruition. Where it didn't come up at this board, and it didn't come up at the zoning board, now it's in front of us, and I would hope that this matter would be resolved tonight, to be honest with you. There's been a lot of effort put forward. I don't feel overly comfortable with that. And, well, that's probably gonna be disappointing to most, but,
I think, and Tina, correct me if I'm wrong, but what Jim's looking for is something that's been added on here that we don't necessarily have to have that as a condition.
right, we don't, and I suppose if you were opposed to it, you could say that specifically. If you did not want, the transfer of Lot 2 to include permission for them to continue to park, I think you could do that. I will say that I think, although nobody stood up from the neighborhood, I remember the conversations or the comments that were made about the additional, the problem with the parking as they have it now. And I think Mr. Avini was right. Those spaces have been there for, I think, longer than 10 years. I think quite a bit longer than that. And as such, they might actually now have non-complying status under zoning. They normally wouldn't be allowed because they're in a residential district, and it is accessory parking for an industrial use on an abutting lot. But they've been there for quite a period of time. They may now be non-complying and actually kind of, that doesn't make them legal, but it doesn't make them illegal either. It kind of gives them a special status. I will say, too, that I did not recall ever hearing one of the residents asking for the parking to be removed. They were most adamant about preserving the buffer they had. and they didn't think, I guess I concluded, at least from their lack of mention, that the parking on that lot wasn't the problem for them. It was the potential loss of the trees. So I don't think it was mentioned during the earlier board discussions. I don't recall it. And it didn't come up at the planning board meeting either, at the ZBA. But I always assumed, frankly, that when they transfer the parcel to the city, they would reserve for themselves the right to continue to park there. It's probably integral to the zoning compliance. It helps you toward the parking requirement, whatever it is for that building, however many spaces they need, those spaces would contribute toward that requirement. So, it doesn't assuage your concern in any way, I'm sure, but it's not a surprise to me that they would want to continue to have that parking there. Is the fence that you mentioned, Mr. Avini, is that a picket fence?
No, it's actually a solid white PVC fence.
Solid white PVC,
That runs all the
okay.
way from this corner on Erie Street all the way down,
Yeah.
within 6 feet or something of that.
So that would typically, to the headlight comment, I would think that that would do, at least in that particular area, the fence alone would take care of some of the headlights from the vehicles. Mr. Chairman, to your question, I think the first order of business might be for the board to consider the waivers that have been requested, and then move on to a decision, perhaps with conditions on the approval of the project. There were a number of waivers that were requested. A request to allow a right-of-way width of 40 feet where 50 is typically required. This Marcy Street is laid out at 40, and there's no option really, certainly not for its entire length, to be widened. The second waiver was a request, probably the biggest one, which was to allow 56 feet of constructed frontage for the new building lot number 1, where 100 feet would have otherwise been required. The third waiver was a request to not require sidewalks on either side of the street when 2 are typically required. The fourth waiver request was to not loop the existing water main. The fifth was to not require any curbing, where the board typically requires straight-face curbing. Sixth was to not require a cul-de-sac, where a turnaround is typically required at the end of a road. And lastly, the waiver, next to last, was a request to not provide 2 shade trees. The last waiver request was that the board waive the requirement for the installation of a street light at the end of the road. My recommendation to the board would be to grant all of the waivers with the exception of the one about the street light. And having said that, I think it's worthwhile taking a minute to explain in particular the recommendation on the waiver about the constructed frontage. In my 10 years here, the board has never granted a waiver of the requirement for whatever the frontage is. The board has always required full build-out. But this is really a unique circumstance that we find ourselves in here that may very well warrant this rare waiver. And that would be because imposition or an insistence on requiring the 100 feet of frontage would in fact eliminate much of the buffer that exists within the Marcy Street layout. And that was one of the 2 areas that the neighbors were most concerned about. And so using our regulation and insisting on compliance will in fact be counter to something that the public wanted and the public good, which makes it unusual and distinguishes it from many others. Interestingly, too, in this instance, we sort of have 3 parties of interest: the residents, the developer, and the city generally. And in this case, all 3 have something valuable to contribute toward this decision. The neighbors have never registered opposition to the idea of another house being built there, despite the additional density and the construction noise and dust and parking and traffic that will come with an additional house. They have no issue with that, but the concern again was the buffer. The developer is willing to donate or to give to the city certain rights, and I would hope in Marcy Street and certainly Lot 2, which most developers are not able to do. They usually have to take down everything that's on a property to do their development, and in this case, the developer is willing to go above and beyond. He initially offered a restriction in the deed that would prevent the cutting. And when we talked about that a little further, we discovered that actually city ownership would be even safer, if you will, for the residents, and that, you know, at least at that point, you wouldn't have a private property owner owning them and perhaps forgetting his deed restriction and taking a few trees down before the neighbors could place a call to get them to stop. So that's an unusual circumstance. And then thirdly, I think the city, through its planning board here and the zoning board of appeals, by granting some relief from, in this case, the frontage requirement, and in the case of the ZBA, the lot size, the city contributes toward the solution by relaxing those two regulations that would otherwise have created a situation that was difficult for the residents. So I think if we all pull together and work as a unit, we will actually be able to find a way to get a development here that will allow the developer to build the house he wants, but in a way that really minimizes the negative impacts on the residents. That's really the reason why I would support and recommend all the waivers. I don't support or recommend the waiver on the street light. I think one is required. I checked with the Public Works Director. Typically, your requirement is to have the light at the very end of the street. And obviously, if you put that here, that may require an additional tree or two to come down for that extra space. So I had actually talked with the applicant about whether or not it might make sense to put the street light on the existing pole at the corner of Marcy and Albany and have it shine back toward the end of the road, as opposed to having a light at the end of the road shining up toward Albany. But for what it is worth, and I need to explain this to you, the Public Works Director was insistent. He was concerned that that would not shed enough light at the end of the road. He really would like to have it be required at the end of the road. And if it were to cause some sort of illumination issue for the people at number 2 or lot 1, the board could always, or the city could reconsider its placement and perhaps move it to the corner of Marcy and Albany if it proved to be problematic at the end of the street. But he was adamant, he thought it should be at the end of the road, so I sort of parroted that here in my recommendation and would suggest to you that maybe you don't grant that one. But all the others I would be supportive of.
Anybody? Claudia?
So, Tina, would it make some sense for us to go through your recommendations as the conditions? Because if indeed members are comfortable with the conditions, then they may be comfortable with the waivers, or vice versa, but without having heard all of them, that may result in some concerns.
A great suggestion. So let me continue to the heart of the matter, which would be the conditions that I would recommend to you for consideration. The first condition would be that approval would be subject to receipt of a variance from the minimum lot size requirement of the Woburn zoning ordinance, which variance authorizes Lot 1, shown on the plan as a building lot. This condition includes satisfaction of any conditions that might be imposed on the variance by the Zoning Board of Appeals. The second condition would be that prior to the issuance of a building permit, the applicant shall have offered to the city ownership of Lot 2, shown on the plan, at no cost to the city, and the city council shall have accepted it. The third condition would be prior to the issuance, and this is where we may diverge a little bit from what you had seen in print for the ZBA. Prior to the issuance of a building permit, the applicant shall have offered to the city at no cost to the city all of its right, titles, and interest in the right-of-way known as Marcy Street that are associated with lots 1 and 2 on this plan, and the parcel that's owned by New Horizons Beverly on the south side of Marcy Street, shown as Assessor's Map 54, Block 11, Lot 1. That was the one that was identified by Mr. Avini a little earlier this evening. And having offered those to the city would then have accepted them. The areas being referenced in this condition would be depicted on a plan that we would attach to the decision, which would include, I've given you a copy of it in your packet, but it would include the portion of Marcy Street right-of-way in front of Lot 2, the portion that's in front of the New Horizons Beverly parcel at map 54, block 11, lot 1, and the portion of Marcy Street that runs in front of lot 1 to the center line. The fourth condition would be that prior to planning board endorsement of the plan for recordation at the Registry of Deeds, the plan would be revised in 3 ways. Number 1, to include both a specific location for a street light at the end of Marcy Street and design specs for the same that meet the requirements of the Woburn Department of Public Works. Number 2, that the plan be revised to address other requirements of the Public Works Department that were listed in the memorandum to me dated December 8th, 2024, from Commissioner J. Duran. And thirdly, we would condition the plan being revised to delete all references to the area within the Marcy Street right-of-way that are noted as Area A on sheet 1 of 3, including the area label A, the square footage, and the crosshatch markings. The 5th condition would be that all utilities shall be underground. And the last one would be that the construction completion date for this subdivision would be March 12 of 2026. And any extension of the completion date beyond that date may be contingent upon the developer posting additional funds to ensure sufficiency of the surety posted to guarantee project completion. That last condition, I would hope, would be unlikely to be needed. This is a 1-lot subdivision with a very small road extension. One would not expect it would take more than 2 years to finish. But if it does, you would have the option, and you're notifying them up now, that they might be required to post additional surety at that time, should they need more than 2 years. And those are my conditions suggested.
Any comment from the board members? Claudia?
So I think that these conditions are reasonable and possible. And should the ZBA decide that they will grant a variance, they could certainly adopt these conditions. They're certainly free to adopt other conditions, but, these would be our suggestions. With respect to conveying right, title, and interest to the right-of-way on Marcy Street, if the concern is, well, we don't have anything to give, well, I think the lawyers can figure it out. All right, title, and interest is whatever you have. So with regard to whatever may have been drafted by the applicant to present to the Zoning Board of Appeals, they've presented it to us. We can decide to accept it, we can decide to reject it and go our own way. And then, of course, the ZBA will have, the right to do whatever in their purview and judgment they think is right. So I would be fine with accepting Tina's recommendation and moving this matter on the basis of her attachment A to our agenda tonight. That's all.
Okay. Anybody else? Mr. Benny, do you have something to add to this?
Thank you, sir. So the only thing I would like to add is, the only thing I didn't hear the planning director mention was the 18-foot parking easement. And we'd like that to be included in these conditions. On lot 2.
Question on that one? Do we even have that say? Because the way I look at it right here is that particular piece of land is being conveyed to the city. Who within the city has the ability to give them that piece of land, that piece that they want to park in? Well,
so if you included it in your condition, then the city solicitor, as he's working with the developer, because that's now who it would move on to, be up to the solicitor to then work with the planning board director to finalize the language of the transfer. If the planning board included language suggesting that the 18 feet be reserved and the parking continued, that would be instruction to the solicitor. And he would include that language in any deed, or accept that language in any deed that might be drafted by the petitioner, or that he might draft. If you do not include it, then there is no requirement for them or for the city to accept it. That doesn't mean that Cummings wouldn't condition their offer on having that included, and then I guess it would be up to the city solicitor to determine whether or not he should accept that language in the deed. I don't know if that language was included. I'm trying to be the solicitor, and I'm not sure it's fair. I'm not sure that the solicitor would find a restriction like that to be violative of the condition that I mentioned. They are still gonna offer the parcel to the city for 2 acres, and if you remain silent on the issue of parking, he probably will say, well, that doesn't limit, or in any way change your condition. He might accept it. He might also come back to you and ask for clarification. Do you want it? So maybe it is best to decide that here tonight and decide whether or not you want to include that in your condition or not. That would be the clearest thing for him.
I would request that the board can consider that.
So I'll throw this out to the other board members, is that, when we went down there and looked at it and we were talking about this whole thing, I never really envisioned in my mind that those parking spaces were gonna go away. I don't know if anybody else. It seems like, Jimmy, like you thought those parking spaces were gonna go away?
The conveyance of the documents on the as-built drawings, in my opinion, did not depict the lots properly. They did not show the pavement on Lot 2, on the original submittal, which would have brought it to light right out of the gate. Okay? When we did our field walk around the backside to Henshaw Street, and the questions were raised, where the corner of the lot was, that's when it came to a head. That the 18-foot stalls that are over there, plus or minus, were actually in the private right-of-way. Okay, which would be the rights to Lot 2, owning up half of the private way. So now, when it was presented to us, in my opinion, a recollection, that we are gonna convey the Lot 2 and keeping the trees the way they were, when Claudia and Tina went to the zoning board, and to see if we get the board to give them some relief on lot size, okay, or configuration. And that's the last I heard of it. So seeing this here this evening, not having weighed in and not hearing anything from the residents when they had the opportunity to speak, or the city councilors that are present here this evening, that have been at these board meetings and the site visits, it's just coming out of left field to me. And it's definitely a concern.
And I may be, well, I don't know if I can explain it to you or not, but I think, Mr. Aveni, are you afraid that when you transfer this parcel of land over to the city, that all of a sudden you won't be able to park there anymore? Because technically, I don't want to say you're illegally parked there now, but it's not a parking lot, and you're parking there. It's part of Lot 2.
Right, but at least it's
Okay.
under common
So
law.
are you afraid that if this goes through the way it is, and you convey that land over to the city, that at that point, they're gonna come down then and say you can't park here anymore?
Theoretically, yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Does that answer your question, so why this has
Exactly
just
the
come up?
question.
Okay.
That was a concern, that I know I mentioned it on a sidebar about putting arborvitae's there to help them out. But I've heard sufficient information for my decision, so.
Okay. So that's why I think that we're a little confused by that, because I don't think any of us thought that that would change. Because we looked at it as you probably pretty much being illegally parked there now.
Right.
Am I correct in saying that, or am I?
We were just looking to keep it the same.
Keep it the same, yes. That's really what we were looking for, is keeping it the same.
That's our intention too. We'd like to memorialize that.
And I can also throw something out there too, that by throwing this on there, if this does not get approved, then you may have opened up a can of worms that didn't need to be opened up.
I think by being here, I probably opened up a can of worms and talking about it. You're absolutely right. Cat's out of the bag.
Well, no, we're not gonna say anything. Okay, thank you. All right, so the first thing I'm gonna do is go back to the conditions. And, because we should do the conditions first. And there were, the waivers. There were 7 waivers. If the board is okay with that, I'd like to just not take the waivers individually, but take as 7 waivers, and have it as one motion.
All right, would you like a motion?
I would love a motion, yes.
I would make a motion to accept the planning board director's recommendation as to the disposition of the waiver request, granting all but the waiver with regard to the streetlight.
Second on that?
Second.
Any, all those in favor? 3, 4, 5. 5 in favor, 0 against.
Yes, and just for the record, the other two members abstained because they were absent from at least one segment of the hearing and were unable to qualify themselves to get back into the decision, so, thank you.
So now we'll to the director's recommendation.
Yes.
And we discussed that part 3, that they've asked about the conveyance of the 18-foot parking easement. So before we get into the actual recommendation by the, does anybody else want to discuss that particular aspect of it? Because that is not in, that is currently not in the recommendation that the director is making.
I could amend my recommendation to incorporate it.
It doesn't seem like anybody really wants you to do that. Because nobody's suggesting it. So,
Would you
yes,
like another motion?
I would like a motion, yes.
I would make a motion to approve the 6 conditions in the planning board director's recommendation and append them to our approval of this project.
Motion by Claudia to accept the director's recommendation on the conditions to this proposal. Do I have a second on that?
Second.
Second by Carolyn. All those in favor? 5 in favor, 2 abstain. That's it?
And if anyone needs to look at our minutes, the minutes of the meeting should reflect that the planning board members wished the parking and all of the buffer to remain unchanged except for the development.
Yeah, pretty much.
Very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, and good luck to you, good luck to the residents. We are hopeful that all of this has reached a satisfactory conclusion, and I would urge all of you to attend the Zoning Board of Appeals meeting next month.
Thank you all for your assistance in
You're
this.
welcome.
Totally a group effort, for sure. Tina, thank you.
You're
Good
welcome,
luck
my
on your
friend.
future endeavors.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, under public hearings is an amendment to not change the lights. There's an amendment regarding murals.
Yes.
Zoning amendments regarding murals. Is Tina, you speaking on that?
Yes, I'll be happy to while Casey sets up. So members of the board, you'll recall that a number of months ago now, we approached you as staff about the possibility of amending the zoning ordinance to allow murals in non-residential districts in the city of Woburn. It was an outgrowth of discussion that took place at first in front of the Redevelopment Authority. There was a report done in 2021 about how the downtown could rapidly recover from the effects of COVID and the closures and all the issues that came with it. And one of the recommendations in that report was that the city consider allowing murals, in particular for the downtown, as an amenity for the public and a draw for the community. As we discussed it, there are other places in the city where property owners have expressed interest in also having murals. So as the conversation expanded and continued, we created a draft of a zoning amendment that has a couple of pieces, but would essentially define a mural, and as it's currently written, would allow murals in all non-residential districts in the city, subject to a couple of things: a building permit if it was not going to be painted directly on the wall, and a mechanism for the building inspector to have enforcement if and when murals might fall into disrepair. So the board members discussed a proposal a number of months ago. voted in favor of sponsoring it for consideration before the city council. The city council has its public hearings scheduled for, I think, next week. And so your hearing tonight is the hearing that comes as a result of that filing a few months ago. Casey Haggerty, our Economic Development Manager, is here tonight to just give you a real brief PowerPoint and sort of recollection of some of the major points of our proposal. Casey?
Good evening, everyone. I think Tina did a great job explaining that, so I can fly through this PowerPoint pretty quickly. Not much has changed since we last met in December. At the February 20th City Council meeting, they accepted the new petition, and this is the required public hearing. Their public hearing will be on the 19th next week. So like Tina said, the WRA has identified creating a mural program as one of their priorities. This came from the local rapid recovery plan that was done in 2021 that highlighted the significance of implementing a mural program citywide. And additionally, we've heard growing interest from property owners and different arts groups across the city about the interest in painting murals in various locations. Currently, our building commissioner interprets the Woburn zoning ordinance that all murals are signs, regardless of their content, and thus must follow sign regulations, which is really limiting for murals that tend to be larger in scale than what the sign ordinance allows. So we're proposing 4 changes to the zoning code, or the zoning ordinance, to allow for murals. The first is adding a definition of mural, as you see up here, and you've seen before. There are no changes to the definition of mural since you last saw it. We are amending the definition to sign to add a line that says this definition does not regulate murals. This is the only slight change that you've seen since the last meeting per the request of the city clerk. I think initially the line that we were adding was maybe 67 or 27. She asked that we just add it to the end of the use table section, so now it's line 78A, and that was just for ease of updating the rest of the use table. So as you see here, we're proposing to allow murals in all commercial zoning districts. And the fourth change to the zoning code is adding a line 28, which would require a building permit for any, for the connection detail if a mural is not painted directly on the wall, and also gives the building commissioner authority to order the repair or removal of murals that are in disrepair. So you've seen this before, but murals have the ability to transform dull and vacant spaces into vibrant, visually appealing areas. They really reflect the culture and history in a community. It's found that there's often a reduction in crime in places where murals are installed. They create a sense of place and community. And they're an investment in the community. Some of these murals are very expensive, and they're generally a significant investment. And because of that, the content and placement are tasteful and professional. So, just a few locations that the city's identified as potential mural spots. This is downtown in our Pocket Park, which is in the BD zoning district. There's also a few other locations in the BD district that might be potential locations for murals. You see kind of the alleyway next to Studio Cafe, the side of Roma's, the side of Ixtapa, and that's the side of the mobile station in Woburn Center. But also there are other candidates in other zoning districts that may be potential good fits. So this is the BN zoning district down in Central Square, 675 Main Street. It's currently a medical spa that has wanted to do something out there but hasn't been able to because of the zoning currently. Here we have IP zoning district out on New Boston Street, another potential candidate for a good potential candidate for a mural. This is the back of 287 Montvale Ave, which is in the BN zoning district. This is facing the bike path that runs along Montvale Ave. This is currently the Montvale Mart. Here we have the IG zoning district, potential wall there at Lord Hobo that might be a good candidate. We have a location in the BH zoning district. This is the side of Flip the Bird, located at 880 Main Street. And then we have the wall on the corner of Main Street and Green Street, which is in the BN zoning district. So you can see that there are a lot of good candidates citywide, not just located within the business district, business downtown zoning district. And as you know, there are a couple of murals that are presently in Woburn. This is at the 40B project at 1042 Main Street. They had a special, or a permit through the Zoning Board of Appeals through 40B to allow for the development and the associated mural on their pump house. This is a mural that's, you know, pre-existing on the side of Peppercorn House at 318 Main Street. And then the Woburn Village has a mural located at 300 Mishmum Road that was allowed through 40R zoning. So, you know, there are some examples of murals within the city that tend to be well-loved and popular. And with that, I think we can take any questions or answer any other, provide you with any other information.
Any questions for Casey? Dave?
So at one point,
Sorry.
that wasn't me.
No, that was
My pacemaker's not that loud. The, we talked about no moving parts. And we're sure about that, because you know what my concern was.
Yeah. We have it, I believe it's in the definition. Sorry, it's been a while since we've looked at this, but I know that we, where did we put this, Tina?
Well, I'm wondering why it's not reflected in that mural. I wonder if that's an older version.
It could be an older version, but it is in the city council order that was filed. I can pull that up for you. Confirm that, because I don't want to make the mistake.
All right, so in the definition of mural that's before the council, we added a sentence at the end that I'm not sure is on the screen. A mural is defined this way: a non-commercial picture or decoration typically painted, which is for artistic, cultural, or societal purposes only, including but not limited to painting, fresco, or mosaic. A mural shall be considered a sign if its content is related by language, logo, or pictorial depiction to the advertisement of any product or service offered at or the identification of any business located on the premises where the mural is located. A mural shall be steady and stationary with no visible moving or movable parts or flashing, animated, or intermittent illumination.
I just, in my mind, had this image of the old Revere Beach amusement park, and everything was flashing and moving, and I just wouldn't want us to end up with somebody, which is why I recommended that.
Yeah, so you can see this is the order that was submitted to the city council, so that line is here. I apologize, that was.
No, that's fine, I just didn't see it on the one you
Yeah,
just
nope,
gave.
you're good.
Okay, I'm good, thank you.
Good catch.
Any other questions of Casey? Yes, ma'am.
Hey, Casey, great job, this looks good. The only question I have was, I think we had mentioned this the first go-around, was, is there a board or, does somebody proof this before it goes up? Is there like a mechanism for that?
So city staff would look at a proposed mural just to determine whether or not it was commercial in nature or not. Otherwise, there'd be no, you know, artistic overview.
Okay, all right, good enough, thank you.
Yeah.
Casey, is there any buffer zone between residential and these approved zones or proposed zones?
No, not as proposed.
Do you feel that there should be?
I personally don't feel that there should be. I think there are a lot of circumstances where residential property abuts commercial property that's in quite a state of disrepair. I think some beautification may be a benefit to the residents. I also think that I don't think there's going to be too many circumstances where a residential property abuts a commercial property that is a good candidate for a wall, for a mural, because of, you know, a variety of factors, whether it be, you know, architectural details on the building, you know,
Visibility from.
visibility from the street. I don't see it being an issue.
I only bring it up because when you showed the 880 property down Central Square, the old Wells Drug, it abuts the old Wyman School. And if a mural goes up there in that scenario, that people have varied views of what's acceptable and what isn't, right? Are people gonna take offense to it? all right? They may be more sensitive in that environment.
Yeah.
In the same token, does that property get redeveloped and a developer sees a mural that they may or may not agree with? That may, you know, slant their vision on the proposed property. I think it's something that we may want to consider. Other than that, I don't have any
Yeah,
questions.
we can certainly look into it. I know, here's the example up at 1042 where this mural, you know, butts right up against a residential property, and we've only heard positive things about this project so far, but we can certainly look into something like that. I mean, otherwise, I guess this would just be a little house-looking building, so it adds some character.
And you get a glimpse of what they were planning for a mural on that property in the picture that Casey showed. They had actually started to draw a mural, and the building inspector on a Saturday happened to happen by, see what they were doing, and stop them, which is the right thing to do before they actually create a violation. But it looked to me, I don't know, you can't tell much from that photo, but was it like a winged horse or something?
Yeah,
that
I
they
think
were-
that situation's a little bit different because I think this would fall into the commercial nature because that's their logo.
Well, that's true.
So I think that's not
That
the
wouldn't have been
best
allowed.
example of what's up there, but
But that's the wall you were talking about.
Yes, yeah.
Excuse me, that would not be allowed if that was the
this would
case.
not be allowed. They won't be able to put up their logo. You know, it's a medical spa, so they wouldn't be able to put up,
Okay,
I don't know, equipment that they use there.
thank you.
Right.
Are there questions of Casey? Yes, Carol.
So one of the other concerns that I had, one was the buffer zone, I think we originally talked about early on. And as far as the building owners and commercial tenants, so these commercial tenants can come in essentially and put a mural on the building.
Only the property owner, you know, would be able to put the mural up. I think if the tenant worked with the property owner, they would be able to, you know, put a mural up, but it would be up to the property owner to allow that.
So that would have to be something that's written into the lease. And where I'm going is, again, as far as the repair, I understand it's going to be regulated, but let's say, for example, the tenant decides, the tenant's allowed to put up a mural, tenant leaves, it's in a state of disrepair, they come in and want the property owner to fix it, do the repairs, and it's costly, and it's met with some resistance, then what is the next step for repair of the building?
I think that's exactly what happened. The building, and in fact, in this case, when he saw it, the building inspector didn't stop, pull his car over and talk to the people doing it. He went back to the office and called the owner of the property and said, your tenants are doing something that's about to be a zoning violation. They need to be stopped. So I believe the owner was the one that called them.
And you know, I'm not super familiar with what's in commercial leases, but I'm sure there's restrictions on what a tenant is allowed to do on the exterior of the building without, you know, owner permission, generally.
And it would fall in that
Right.
same vein.
And, you know, it does allow for the building commissioner to step in, you know, if he finds that the murals are in a state of disrepair, he has the authority to issue that they're either cleaned up or removed.
But again, my concern with that is enforcement.
Is it,
You have the building owner, let's say you get to that step, then the building owner sells, then what?
so if the building owner sold and there was a mural by a tenant on the side of the property, then the new owner is going to, or the prospective owner is going to decide whether or not they want to purchase the property with that mural in place. If they didn't, I suppose they would call the current owner and say, I'd be happy to buy your property, but not while that mural's on the side. And my guess is the owner would have that painted in no time. I'm trying to practically get where I thought you were heading, which was a concern that a property owner might end up liable for repairing something that a tenant did. I guess that's true of most landlords anyway, right? They put up with whatever the tenant does, or they're left with it.
And/or left with it and then sells or leaves for whatever reason, and how long does the building sit in that state?
Well, and that's why we did have something in there for the building inspector. Should it be left for a while, the paint begins to fade or chip, it becomes unreadable or unsightly, there is a way for the building inspector to call for enforcement and repair, excuse me.
And I guess theoretically, these murals will not be connected to the business that's in there, in terms of, whatever's painted on the wall. So it, could be transferable from one business to another.
That's a good
It's
point.
not like a pizza place moving into a dog grooming studio or something like that, where they have pizza painted on the wall.
I had asked the building inspector, on the other wall that we didn't show you on that downtown pocket park, the woman in the building, the establishment that has the wall, is a dog grooming establishment. And she had expressed an interest, she's quite an artist in her own right, and she had expressed an interest to me in painting her own mural in her own building of a bunch of different types of breeds of dogs. And she showed me some of her artwork. It was really impressive. So I asked the building inspector, well, in this case, what would that? He said, I would not allow that because I believe if you put dogs on the side of that building, you are advertising the business, which is dog grooming. So he would not have permitted that. So to Casey's point, a mural would not have anything directly related to the business that was in there that might leave. It would have to be different.
But if they left, they could put dogs on there.
Yes.
So,
Yes, if it was a variety store, they could put dogs on that wall. Yes, that's how that works.
Unless they sold dog food.
Well, then maybe there'd be enforcement issues.
Okay, any other questions of Casey? Okay, seeing none, this is a public hearing. Anybody in the public who would like to step forward and speak in regards to zoning amendments regarding murals, please do.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. And before I start, I'd like to say, Tina, I was here for your first meeting.
You
may
were,
not
I remember scaring you in the ladies' room by mistake.
That's right. And here I am for your last.
I'm delighted. It's nice to see you.
Same here, and thank you. Thank you for all your help.
Thank you.
Please state your name and
Oh,
address.
yes, thank you. My name is Rosa DiTucci, and I live at 82 Arlington Road in Woburn. I have so many questions and about this ordinance. And after hearing, and thank you, by the way, for all the work that everyone has put into this, but I will tell you up front that I am 100, and maybe after this evening, 150% opposed to this proposal for so many reasons. First, I heard that this was to be only on commercial buildings, but not as advertising for the business. So who exactly, which tenant or property owner is going to spend the enormous amount of money to do this on the outside of their building? Who is actually painting these murals? What sorts of messages are going to be on them? To whom will these messages prove offensive? I understand we want inclusion, we want connection in our community, but I don't believe a mural has ever solved that problem. I find them, frankly, when I see them in an urban setting, I find them a little bit upsetting. They're usually in terrible shape. They're usually faded, peeling, cracking, or they have been graffitied over by other artists who'd like to leave their imprint on top of what is already there. So I just, aesthetically, I don't enjoy it. But that's my personal opinion. As one of the members said, art is subjective, right? Everyone has a different idea. What I find unlikable, someone else may love. So who becomes the arbiter of what is or isn't appropriate? From what I've heard, there isn't anyone approving murals. There isn't anyone saying, well, that message is appropriate for our city, or that message is not, or this image is okay, or that one is not. It's basically a do as you like. That's how it sounds to me. The other thing that concerns me is that the photos that we saw of potential locations are all in terrible shape. But those aren't all the locations. What we failed to put up there are those beautiful brick buildings in downtown Woburn, a number of which are on Macris, the historical database. You can't deface those buildings. They're made out of brick. What happens when someone has painted on brick? And at some point, this craze, or whatever it is, for murals will change. What happens then? How do you remove that paint? You have to, the only way to adequately remove paint from brick is to use chemical strippers. You have now defaced an architectural part of our city. And most landlords, when those murals become defaced, and the building inspector goes and says, you have to fix that, they're not going to repaint it with another mural. They will slap flat, one-dimensional paint on top of those beautiful bricks, those architectural features. And that's what we're going to have. And it concerns me, especially in downtown, because that's not how I want to see our city progress. So there needs to be a way to manage this, to make sure that if you do this, and I hope you don't, that it is appropriate, that it does recognize that a lot of our city buildings are historical in nature. They're not all those flat concrete block buildings that were shown this evening. And we need, without any control, this is going to get out of hand. Which leads me to my second concern. And someone mentioned a can of worms earlier this evening in relation to another matter. But once the city allows art and interpretive art or self-expressive art somewhere, it can't say no to anyone. You run smack dab into that big old block of problems, which is called the First Amendment and freedom of speech. You can't dictate what someone can or cannot say. This is going to keep Mark Salvati busy for a long, long time. So I'm hoping that you will seriously consider other ways to help the downtown. We have a new mayor, and I'm hoping perhaps, where are you there, Mike? He might take another look at some of the parking recommendations or some of the recommendations that the board has made in the past regarding getting people into the downtown. There are other alternatives. I don't believe this is the answer, given what you're trying to achieve. But I thank you. I thank you for listening to me. And again, Tina, thank you.
Anyone else? Oh, yeah. Casey, is there is there a
Oh, yeah, sorry,
sign-in
my,
sheet up there?
Probably under the other one.
Just ready.
So, thank you all for having this meeting. My name is Marian Arias. I'm new to Woburn. I still feel like a newbie. It's been a little over a year. I live at 80 Arlington Road. I'm actually a neighbor of Rosa. Moved here originally from Cambridge, town of murals, city of murals. Left Cambridge right out of college and moved to New York City, where I was living for 24 years, and then moved back for COVID to be closer to family. I have lived my whole life in murals, come from an artistic family and very much love art. As someone who still owns property in New York City, a city that is right now relegated with a lot of graffiti, a lot of heavy crime, I don't think anybody sees a mural and goes, hey, I want to shop there. This looks like a town where I think prices are going to go up in housing. I want to invest in here. I'm yet to see it as someone who grew up in it and then also still owns property in it. I think if the idea is to make our city and our square more diverse, more inclusive, I think there's other ways of doing that. Personally, I shop local, I live local, I employ local. I think when I think of diversity and getting that word out, that's just the way that I want our community to be thinking. Artwork is beautiful. I spend every weekend at some museum and travel around with my kids to make sure that they get it. But murals that go up, sooner or later get defaced. I've seen it. I'm dealing with it in my property in New York City actually right now. I don't look at it and go, geez, my property value's gone up. And again, I agree with Rosa. Who's policing the type of artwork we're putting out? How does it create inclusivity? And how does it create business in our square? I spent this weekend actually eating at a restaurant there and then also dropping off dry cleaning, getting to know the people that live around here, getting invested myself in what we bring here. I also work really hard to invest into local as well. My dogs get groomed here on 5 Star. The people that take care of my dogs are actually from India. I met them on rover.com. The community that I walk my dogs with are welcome to LGBTQ. I personally, from Cambridge, and still very much local, but still certainly getting to know a new city, I think there's other ways to engage with people. I think there's other ways to create inclusivity. And we are an inclusive town. I feel I'm quite inclusive myself, and I am diverse, but I don't need a mural, and I don't need an artwork that somebody decides to make me feel welcome. Welcoming to me is meeting like neighbors like Rosa that invite me to come over for dinner, that ask about our kids, that help me with the mowing of my grass, or even like cleaning out, like helping me with removing snow. It's that type of community that we build. A mural isn't going to do that. And I do worry very much about the upkeep of it and who's responsible in policing it. Because what you find offensive, maybe I don't find offensive. And that's something to think about. When I moved to New York in 1996, in 1997 there was artwork that was put up on a mural. And it was done by an African artist as a love for religion. And it was our mayor at the time, Mayor Giuliani, that felt very strongly that it was actually quite offensive because it was made out of, blood and certain parts of the body. And there were a lot of people that felt like, well, that's art, right? But going by it every day for certain cultures and certain people, it wasn't. And I think we have to really start thinking about, if we're going to do it, who's going to police it? And who's going to keep it up to the standards that it should be at? Because if it's going to bring graffiti, and it's going to bring and welcome that type, then how does that win? Where's the inclusivity in that? So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Please sign the sheet.
Did you sign in?
Okay, would anybody else like to speak?
All right, there we go. Well, first of all, I do want to thank Tina Cassidy for all of your work as a planning director, and I do want to also thank Casey Haggerty for putting the slides together. One of the things I learned from the slides that you put together was that the mural on Peppercorn House is non-conforming, and I'm very surprised by that. I like that mural quite a bit. I walk by it every day. I live at 13 Bennett Street. I walk over to Roma's, and I see that mural, and it makes me happy. I think it's a good thing, and it's a little bit disturbing, to be honest, that if that building was to be torn down, they had to rebuild one, they would have to get a variance or something, or maybe they couldn't even put something like that there. So, for things like that, I want to say that I do support the mural ordinance, and I think we should do it. I'm excited to see various spaces that are a bit in disrepair in downtown brought up to, have more beautification. And generally, I feel like some of the concerns people raised can best be addressed by the business owners and the property owners who were interested in maximizing the value of their property. I think sometimes the government needs to do something, but this might be a case where the principle of laissez-faire is the right way to go. That's just my opinion. In fact, with the example about the dogs, it's a bit frustrating to hear someone who has a design. I would love to see that there, and to a certain extent, the way the mural ordinance is adopted, it's such the case that if we were to adopt it, that sign would be an advertisement that there isn't a dog grooming place there. I think that generally when you follow the law and reach a silly conclusion, common sense should win over, and the law should be adjusted to match it. In conclusion, I want the murals. I think we should do it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak in regards to murals?
Good evening. My name is Michael Avaney. I live at 16 Hillside Ave in Melrose, Massachusetts. While I don't have a fiduciary standing here in Woburn any longer. I have spent the last 32-plus years either living in and/or working in Woburn. So I've been here for quite a while. And I do recognize the challenges that the members of the public and the board have brought up here, and certainly appreciate them. I do think there's an opportunity here to do something. It needs a little more thought. It needs a little more, I don't want to say conditions, because there are challenges with the First Amendment, what you can and what you can't do, and all the points were good, who takes care of it. But there are opportunities here, and I think some of the examples that were showing up on the screen really do make a difference and brighten the area. Maybe not all of them, but certainly some of them. And I think it's something that I think the city should at least continue to think about and continue to work on, and maybe potentially find a solution that works for everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public that would like to speak on murals? Seeing none? We have a motion on.
Motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
Motion by Claudia, second by Dave, closing the public hearing on murals. All those in favor? 7-4, 0 against. Okay, to the board, any questions on anything in regards to this? Yes, Mike?
Yeah, just for discussion, a good point was made on buildings of historical significance, downtown with the brick. Is there any way that we could suggest or to prevent that from happening, as far as, a building that's deemed historical? I wouldn't mind to see that on there as well. And as far as, what happens if it's in disrepair, it specifically states that the building commissioner is the one who has the right to have has the responsibility of telling the building owner it must be completely, the repair must be completed within 30 days. But the only problem I see with that is that it's almost after the fact. The building commissioner is authorized to order the repair or removal of any mural in supporting structures, if any, that is in the judgment of the building commissioner is dangerous or in disrepair, or which erected or maintained contrary to this ordinance. Is there, I guess what I'm looking for is, if there would, does it specifically state that, a representation should be shown prior to it, the mural being painted, to pass judgment on it? I mean, I know, Casey, you're saying it's tough to do that, but what if right off the gate, it just was a no-go? I guess what I'm trying to say is that if a mural depicted something that shouldn't be there, at which point is that caught? Is it caught, prior to being painted, or while it's being painted?
Yeah, so I think the idea was that the building commissioner would review the proposed mural to determine whether or not it was commercial in nature.
So there is something
prior to it being painted.
So there is a mechanism that it's being reviewed prior to being painted.
That was the idea, yes.
And then if it was a matter on the other end of disrepair, in a sense, it could happen at any time. I know it's not a great example, but the one that showed that wall where they had started to build a mural and stopped, if the building inspector saw something at that point that he thought wasn't meeting the ordinance, he would stop it right there. Mm-hmm. If it was a mural that was painted and met all the city's requirements and then got tagged by a graffiti artist, he would reach out, presumably, if he just considers it a defacement, he would reach out to the owner and say, hey, that mural now is in this state of disrepair, it's been tagged by a bunch of, graffiti artists. You need to repair it. Either you go back in and repaint it to the way it was, or you cover it with a solid color so that you don't have a mural at all.
Do we need stronger language to state that? I mean, a good example was, so if they painted something that's exposed natural brick, and if it was something that was not deemed good or fitting, it would just be repainted over with a can of rust-colored paint. So would there be some stronger wording to have it reverted back to its original condition?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Whether it be the original brick or...
The original mural?
Exactly.
I suppose the wording could be amended a bit in that regard. I have to think about how.
I'm thinking about that Romans mural. I walked by there the other day thinking the same thing. It's pretty cool. I never realized it.
Yeah, it says authorized to order the repair or removal of any mural. And it doesn't get specific about repair or removal. So is your concern specific to the historic buildings that might be repainted, say, with a flat white paint?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, I would hate to see a mural painted on some historic brick building, for instance, like the side of the library, for example. It's an extreme, but, I mean, yeah, it's extreme. But, again, there's some old brick buildings, I guess Mr. Tucci mentioned in Woburn Center, is if there's a way to kind of, stay away from that and,
I'm wondering if there's a sentence that could be added to the definition of murals, and Casey, I'd be interested in your thoughts, or anybody's thoughts on this. Something along the lines of, murals shall not be permitted on buildings that are eligible for listing on the State Register of Historic Places?
that's,
Would you be happy with something like that?
I would. And as far as the repair back to the original, I mean, I would like to have it covered back to either the original facade or the mural that was acceptable underneath it. Some words to that effect.
Yeah, I guess my only comment on that is I want to check with the building commissioner because that particular sentence was taken from a different part of the zoning code related to just disrepair of buildings generally. And I'm not sure what his standards are for when, any building falls into disrepair and he requires, repairs. I don't want to speak for him on that one.
But we could have a conversation and try to work some language in to the recommendation, which we could then share back with you before we send it to the city council.
I mean, I would just be fine.
Did you like that one I had about the
Yeah.
state register? All right, well, I wrote that one down, so we can do that one.
I have a question. Am I supposed to let you go first? I'm the chairman, I can do whatever I want. It's gonna sound dumb, but where exactly does this stand in general?
You mean the
Like
ordinance?
we're, tonight, what we have in front of us is amendments to the ordinance already.
Correct.
Okay. Has that ordinance already gone to the city council?
No, this is in fact, these amendments, like for instance, the first one is adding a definition of mural
Okay.
and modifying the current definition of sign.
So nothing's gone to the city council?
Well, they have it as a proposal.
As-
And they referred it to the planning board like they do all zoning amendments.
Okay.
It's back here so that you can provide a recommendation. Even though you were the sponsors, it's as if you weren't. In this part of the process, you're asked to consider the zoning amendment and make a recommendation back to the council. Their hearing is next week.
Yep.
And then my guess is it would go after that hearing to committee of the council for 1, 2, or several meetings until they were ready to make their decision.
Okay, so with that in mind, Casey, general question, who does approve the murals? In the ordinance, that's the way it's written, who approves the murals?
So the only approval or disapproval that would be given is it commercial in nature?
Okay.
So if it's determined, be related to the business that is proposing the mural, that would be not allowed. But otherwise, because of First Amendment concerns, there would be no, artistic oversight of what's painted. I think the city can only regulate time, manner, and place, similar to how you permit signs. You can say the sign has to be, certain dimensions and can only be lit in certain ways, but the city has no control over, the font that goes up, the logo that goes up, the colors that go up. that's protected by the First Amendment.
In what the mural is trying to depict is controlled by the First Amendment.
Yes.
Because I have from the beginning thought that that could be a real issue. Because people do today, everybody finds something offensive. I'm Irish, I can't be offended. But for the most part, a lot of people can, and everybody does find it offensive. So we could be getting into the situation where we're allowing these beautiful murals to be put up in which, let's just say, 100 people think it's very offensive. It's awful. I don't know what I don't know what it would be, but and I guess I'm just throwing this out to the board also, is that I do have a problem with murals in general. For that reason, is that we could be just getting ourselves in trouble.
Casey, it might be worth, we asked this question because this has come up on a number of occasions. So Casey, you've actually done some research and made some calls and emails to communities that have had murals for a while to ask the question of, have you ever had one that went up that, was offensive, that generated a lot of calls or opposition? I didn't have the conversations, but I wondered if you could share some of it.
Yeah, I reached out to the Mass Planners Group, which is, the planners from all around the state, and I heard back from about 30 people who allow murals in their communities, and no one has had any issue with offensive murals. Most of them don't even mention murals in their zoning. They kind of just allow them, so we're taking it, a next level, so we have that extra layer of protection. But no, most communities, or all the communities that I've heard back from, have not had issues with offensive content.
That's not to say it wouldn't happen, but it would seem that if 30 communities have had them for, some number of years and have never had an issue, that it's at least an unlikely occurrence. It can always happen, but it's unlikely.
They also could just find them offensive just by being there,
Right, there was a lady earlier tonight that found them to be offensive.
just by being there.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, Jim. Go right ahead. I'm all done for the minute.
Is there any language in the ordinance that's proposed for a timeline for these murals to be up for? Seeing it's falling under the sign ordinance, right, currently? Because that's what the building commissioner classified it as. Beyond the exterior of the building, and there's a regulation of 10 feet square, I believe. But a duration that it can stay up without being revisited. So, similar to what we have for a problem that we've been working through for the last few years, of trying to clean up permits that have gone beyond their expiration date, right, and to get them revisited. So if a mural is given a 5-year time frame for it to be on the wall, right, at that point, the building commissioner or, one of his department members can go by and see if it's in disrepair, A, and it needs to be addressed. B, if the sign review board or whoever's gonna be, the board that's gonna determine that it needs to be dealt with, to give it an extension. At that point, you can say, we wanna see this come back down and restored to its original condition of the wall, the substrate that Michael was mentioning earlier, instead of whitewashing the wall that the resident mentioned, Mr. Tucci. But I think a timeline may be something that curbs some of these concerns, because I was in Stoneham over the last several months, and I see a beautiful 1980s big three of the Celtics. I know you Celtics fans, but they may be a little bit outdated. Just saying, that's personal observation.
Yeah, we presently don't have any language in about a timeline, but it could be something we could explore. I've heard from other people that the lifespan of a mural is around 25 years before it kind of falls into a state of disrepair, if not well-maintained.
Carolyn?
Yes, just to piggyback on that and also some of the comments you made, Bob. First of all, with respect to the content, I understand that to the extent it's only regulated for commercial to make sure that it's not enhancing or advertising the business. But certainly it is subjective, and again, we have a limitation here on buffer zones to residential communities. And again, what's offensive to one person might be beautiful art to somebody else. And I have a problem with that. And I also foresee with that difference in opinion, I see that opening up a can of worms to possible graffiti. Then we have a building that now has graffiti on it, and it's sitting there, and I appreciate the effort that's gone into the ordinance that says, okay, the building commissioner's gonna go out, he'll assess, he'll say, you need to fix this within 30 days is the limit. We all know that might not happen in 30 days, and then what's the next step? If they dispute it, if they dispute that, even if they dispute on the level of not disrepair, but that it might not be appropriate, where's that gonna go? That could end up in a lawsuit for some type of injunction and cost the taxpayers more money. And I know it's all speculation, but that's what we're here to do, and that's our job as planners, so I see that as a little bit of a problem.
If I could interrupt, I had envisioned, and maybe it's something for us to check, but I had envisioned that the building inspector would handle this the way he would any zoning violation, which is give notice, give a period of time to cure, in this case 30 days. And then if they didn't, I know in the case of violations of the zoning ordinance, he's then authorized to assess a fine of, I forget how much it is per day, but it's a daily fine. And also to seek relief in the district court, which is sometimes where he ends up with zoning violations. So my guess is that my understanding is that he would follow that process if in fact he had a mural that was in disrepair and they were slow to fix it. But we would have to confirm that with the building inspector and make sure that that's factual information.
Yeah, that was my understanding too, Tina. I think that's part of the reason why he wanted it to live within the zoning ordinance, was so that he would have that ability.
Dave?
You know, it's funny, I grew up in Cambridge, and every brick building that had an open wall had advertising painted on it. And as time went on, it morphed into being art, because it reminded people of the olden days. So there were these murals that were painted in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s, and as they faded, they were all painted with black paint. And there were stoves and refrigerators, and some of them were carriages with horses, which was advertising then, and then later on it became, oh, isn't that great? It's artwork. And, you know, I could see where you might run into trouble at some point where somebody is saying, why can't I do an artistic rendering of my business? You know, and then in the 60s, which most of you people here don't remember, but I see some folks over there that might remember the 60s, they did all these hippy-dippy murals that they did on the walls, and everybody was outraged by them. But then as time went on, they got used to them, and they started seeing them as art. So as to the buildings, they've always painted brick buildings. I think it's terrible, but they've always painted over brick building, at least, maybe not in Woburn, but I know in Cambridge and Somerville where I grew up, all these beautiful old great brick buildings all had these painted advertising, and it was a 4-story picture of a stove. And, you know, so you get into some conflicting ideas about, is it art? Is it commerce? You know, is it business? You know what I'm saying? And as to the dogs, I understand, well, they could be looked at as they have a grooming business. But on the other hand, I bet it would have been a spectacular drawing, painting. I'm married to an artist, so I'm biased in that regard. So, I mean, this gets really conflicting. And then there's the thing, you know, when they put that electronic monstrosity up on 128 near the railroad station, that electronic thing, and somebody asked me what I thought about it, I said, it looks like a boil on a baby's butt. You know, you get this beautiful landscape of the city of Woburn. You know, when you're driving down 128 and you look across Woburn, it's pretty beautiful, right? And then you hit this electronic thing. So I'm wondering how many people are gonna react to, they're coming into Woburn Center, which I think they've gone, I've been in the city 37 years, and it's a much, much more attractive downtown than it was 30-plus years ago. And then, is there I know we have, I mentioned this when this first came up, the ugly factor. And I know the First Amendment says you don't get to tell somebody something's ugly if they, so I just think this is gonna become a very complicated thing. And I'm not worried about graffiti so much, because we have a great police department. We really do. And I don't see a lot of graffiti in this city, And, I think it's because the people who might do it realize that we have a very strong police force, and you wouldn't get away with that for very long. But at the end of the day, I did vote for this because I think, I want peace at home, but also because I think that art in the world is important, but I'm just concerned about, what does it become in the long term? It seems simple enough when you say, let's do this, but as time goes on, what does it morph into? What does it become? And I'm sure there's many, many, many more buildings than we've considered that could technically do it. Will somebody go to the expense of it? I don't know. But, you got the wrong person owning the wrong building, deciding they want to put up the wrong piece of, is it political? Isn't it political? This is a much more complicated issue than the beautification of the city of Woburn. So, I've got misgivings, but I understand. But like I said, these things that were painted, I worked for the Department of Education, and we just moved in the old building. Across from our building, there was a 3 or 4 story leftover painting of a black stove from the 1920s or 30s, and everybody used to go, wow, look at that beautiful image over there, and it was advertising. So I can see us having some issues down the line. I'm glad, though, there's not going to be any twirling eyeballs or flashing lights. I'm glad
Yeah,
we
no
got that out of
screens.
the way. But that's it. I'm done.
Well, Dave just hit on what I was gonna say, especially back about the dogs on the building. You can't, if the dog company wants to put a mural of some dog playing, how can you say no? You can't go, oh, it's commercial, because it's freedom of speech, isn't it? Can't they just put what they want up?
In that circumstance, we would be able to say no because dogs are related to that business.
And therefore, it's a sign.
Right.
And as a sign, you can't have a sign that big. Sign only can be this big.
I don't know.
That's how we would go.
But here, the other point I was making, Tina, you were saying about the enforcement on repairs. I don't think it has enough bite to it. I think it just goes, and it could be like Carolyn and others said, it could just drag out. And also, it seemed to be that there's no relationship to if the tenant and the owner. The owner should be knows what he's approving through that tenant. To say, I'm on the hook when this goes sour, or it needs repair. And if graffiti gets on there, they can't just go and put a black block on what was, the graffiti was there. I don't think they're gonna pay to redo the whole thing over. It's gonna just, in years from now, everything's gonna start deteriorating, looking like graffiti. And it's not gonna be kept up. That's my opinion. That's all I got.
Thanks, Kevin. Good discussion, but I think we've already sent this to, we've got it written up to send to the city council as a recommendation to do it.
Well, they have the ordinance as we've
What
discussed.
we have in front of us right now is amendments to the particular ordinance.
Yeah, this is what you voted to sponsor on your
Correct.
December 12th
So
meeting.
we now have amendments to what we've already
Right.
voted to
Right.
sponsor. So as much as I love this discussion, I think we've already gone past this, and we need to vote on accepting these amendments.
Well, there's,
And if anybody on the board thinks I'm wrong here,
well, I'm not on the board, but
go ahead.
I'm just looking, and not that you're wrong, but there might be an alternative. We certainly could vote, you certainly can vote this evening, but another option that might be available, I'm gonna turn to Casey for kinda her thoughts on it, just to inform me, because she's done the yeoman's work on this on behalf of the WRA. an option that we have is, rather than ask you to vote this evening, is to allow us to spend a little bit of time, and I've got 2 days, I know Casey's got 2 weeks, but maybe we spend a little time between now and your next meeting, thinking about some of the comments we heard tonight. There may be ways for us to come up with wording that we would suggest you add to what you saw tonight that might address at least some of the issues that have been raised. And having another period of time to do that would allow us to maybe get it to a point where you might feel more comfortable accepting it or recommending its adoption. That's an option.
I think it's a wonderful option.
Cops, Casey, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, as long as that complies with the timeline that the council has.
Yeah, we'll have, you'll now have 21 days from tonight to make the recommendation and file it with the city
Okay.
council. 21 days from the close of the hearing.
We have a meeting in 2.
You do have a meeting in 2 weeks, on the 26th.
Mike?
Yeah, I was gonna say, did we vote? I know we had a motion and seconded to close the public hearing. Did we finalize that vote?
Yes, we did.
Oh, maybe the
I'm
hearing
pretty
hasn't
sure
been
we did.
closed yet.
Wouldn't have gone on.
I might have had a discussion,
I had, Claudia made the motion and Dave Edmonds seconded.
Correct.
7-0 vote
and it was for then we did vote on it, so.
for murals, yeah.
Can we, is it?
You
I
can't
mean,
unclose it.
Can't unclose it?
Nope. I wish you could. Well, let me stop. I don't know, I'd have to think about it. Could the board take a motion to reconsider its earlier vote?
I don't, I'm gonna throw that out to the board. I mean, if we're gonna change it enough, do we feel like we are changing it enough where we need to keep the public hearing open? I'll just throw that out for discussion.
Well, as the person who made the motion to close the public hearing, I think I can ask to reconsider my motion. I mean, why would that motion be any different than any other motion? Because we're still at the same meeting. I think the issue is if you decide later, right? But those are Robert's Rules of Order that I'm not 100% familiar with. But for what it's worth, I would make a motion to reconsider my motion to close the public hearing.
And I'll second my seconding of that previous motion. And for discussion purposes, we owe it to the public, I think, if we're going to have this conversation, to continue to let them have their voice.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to, Claudia put up a motion to reconsider her vote. To close the public hearing, Dave seconded his motion to second that. Seconded his second. All those in favor of reopening the public hearing on the murals, raise their hand. 7-0 passes. Okay. Now,
Okay.
also on that, I will entertain a motion, if the board so be it, to continue this till our next meeting.
That would be March 26th at 7 PM.
Okay. Could I have a motion on that, please?
So moved.
Motion by Claudia to continue this until March 26th, seconded by Dave. All those in favor? 7-0 passes. Okay?
Sounds good.
A little more work. Thank you, Casey.
All right, next up, Sherman Terrace subdivision, updates on progress towards completion.
Mr. Chairman, good evening, members of the board. For the record, Attorney James Giuliano Law Group, 607 Main Street in Woburn. I'm taking over this case for Attorney Salvati, who obviously is upstairs and will no longer be able to take on this matter. I'm here tonight to fill you in on my experience and what has progressed since the last meeting. I understand this has been ongoing for the last couple meetings, last couple months. We're trying to rectify those last issues. I'm familiar with about 7 issues that were addressed by Mrs. Cassidy over the last 2 or 3 meetings. I have been caught up with those issues. I did speak to Attorney Salvati, who filled me in as well. I am having an issue trying to get in touch with the developer, only because he's having some health issues. I am trying to get to the site to look at it, to see if we can address these issues. My understanding, and Ms. Cassidy can fill me in if I'm incorrect, but we need to address these issues. We need to have a new as-built plan brought to the board, and if there's any discrepancies, address those discrepancies, i.e. drainage. I understand there's some walls that were put up. So again, whatever's changed, did it change the drainage? Mr. Slager, who is here tonight, also is part of this. He's going to have to put a certification together, obviously for the plan, but a letter as well, just obviously indicating what was changed. I don't think it's a lot, and I'm hoping it's not a lot, but I just wanted to ask for an extension for this matter. I know we have until, is it April 11th?
Yeah, there was
For a new completion date?
I think it was actually May, the construction completion date.
Okay.
But the resolution of these issues is imperative in order for him to be able to finish that subdivision by the end of May.
So, based on, again, not to rehash what's going on, I'm sure you know more than I do at this point, but the turnaround was built smaller than what was requested by the board at the time. My understanding is that the turnaround that was requested is still within the easement area, so I do not believe that the easement itself is going to be an issue. I know one of the lots is already sold, so thankfully that shouldn't be too much of an issue. But we do have to address the turnaround itself. I have to go probably to the fire department, make sure that that is going to meet their standards. I do know that a geocell was put down and done for stabilization. The exact specifications I will have to the board next meeting. So I do plan on having a bunch of information that the board can digest at the next meeting. I can't promise that everything will be addressed, but I surely hope that most of it, if not all, will be by the next meeting. I just have to get in touch. Again, my plan is to go there this weekend for a site visit with my client and just get an understanding of what needs to be completed and how we can address all the issues that are remaining. So,
Any questions? Yes, Claudia.
Counselor, do you think you can be ready for the next meeting, or is that too optimistic?
I can be ready for the next meeting with a good amount of information that needs to be addressed. I can't promise that everything will be addressed, because I'm sure there's going to be some comments, but I will try like hard to get all of the issues addressed. The thing that, I shouldn't say makes me nervous, but I do have to have an as-built plan done, which is one of the requirements with any changes. I just don't know if that's possible in 2 weeks with the engineer.
But if we put you on the agenda for, what is it, the 26th?
26th.
Then you're confident you can come back with at least some more information, since you're in a position of taking over from prior council and, things are probably in disarray at the moment.
Yes, I do feel like we'll have a good amount of these items addressed
Okay.
and can be discussed at the next meeting.
Great, thank you. I'm all set.
I'll throw this out to the board members. Instead of having them back here in 2 weeks with most of the information that we would need, would it be better to have them come back and say maybe 2 weeks after that? So you'd have 4 weeks, basically, if you came back in the first meeting in April.
April 9th.
You'd have 4 weeks. Would that be much better?
I don't have a problem with that. I just think procedurally, maybe it might be beneficial to bring what we have, and then obviously the new director can take a look and make comments, or maybe some comments. I can give some comments, probably not in 2 days, but at least, and it's up to the board. It doesn't matter to me, but it may be more beneficial to keep things moving and maybe knock some things off of that list if we can, but I'll defer to the board with that.
Okay, so with that statement, I will entertain a motion.
Motion to continue this matter to our next meeting on March 26th.
Motion by Claudia to continue to March 26th.
Second.
Second by Carolyn. All those in favor? All those opposed? 7-0.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Tina,
you.
thank you for all your help.
You're welcome.
And all your sympathy towards me, most importantly, but it's always appreciated. So good luck in retirement. I'm very jealous.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck to you.
Thank you.
All right, next up, Highview Estates subdivision.
Last but
Date
not
on
least.
litigation, extension of construction completion date.
Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you all again. And Tina, congratulations on your retirement.
Early escape.
Well earned. I sent a brief letter to Karen this afternoon. I assume it's been circulated, but if not, we have a settlement agreement with Eversource on the blasting issue. That has been reduced to a writing. Senko Builders has signed the agreement. I heard back from counsel for Eversource yesterday afternoon that they will be sending us a signed copy of the agreement. I was expecting it today, but it's forthcoming. And I am cognizant of the fact that the board has requested a comprehensive construction plan with completion dates. And I will invite Mr. Santullo to appear to give an update on that, but he is involved in two large projects right now, which won't be completed until the end of the year. So he knows at least that until the end of the year, he's not going to be able to start this this project. And obviously, since I think the plan for the project was first recorded in 2007, they started work in 2015. A lot of time has passed. The financial realities of financing a construction, a development of this size have obviously changed substantially in the last 2.5 years. And so I wanted to obviously invite the board's questions and give Mr. Santullo an opportunity to update you on where he is and when he thinks he can commence the project.
Good evening. Michael Santullo, Senko Builders. Just to reiterate what he just said, a lot of time has passed. So obviously this project has to be re-estimated. The site work contractor that started in 2016 won't be the one that's going back there, as he is downsized and because he's at retirement age. So I'm really kind of, as far as planning and estimating and getting financing from Financial Institute, all that is going to start as if I was getting approved for the first time today. So I'm going to need some time to do that. And like he said, I do currently have 4 projects, 2 of them of decent size, that I have currently financed and are underway. So personally, I am not prepared to go there and start work in a month or a week or anything like that. So I'm being completely transparent. Once I get that settlement in our hands signed by Eversource, which we have yet to see, I'll give you a copy of the board. There are some conditions that, main drilling and blasting is going to have to add to their blasting plan to satisfy Eversource and some other things, which you guys will see in the settlement agreement. And now's the time I'll be working hard on making a plan so I can come back in here and articulate accurately a realistic timeline of when we can commence.
Any questions? David?
Refresh me, how many units are we talking about?
10 houses. 10 houses.
So it might be one of the last large developments in the city.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've waited.
Yeah.
We've waited patiently for the utility to be responsive. We're looking forward.
Yeah.
to,
Me as
seeing the plan.
me as well.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Yes, Jim?
Propose that we request a letter from the applicant 90 days prior to the start of mobilization of this project, and at the same time to give a best estimate on a schedule of construction. We know the neighbors have had concerns, Ward Altman's voiced concerns, and rather not have this get started than an uproar, and people, they know about it ahead of time. They can review the drawings at the building department and go from there.
Yeah, I have every intention of crossing every T and dotting every I and dealing with every board before we go back there. So.
Okay.
And I'd like to make that as a motion, to request a notice to start construction, commence construction, 90 days prior, with a proposed schedule of construction activities.
Have a second on that?
I'll second for discussion. So, Jim, I think that's a great idea. I think that is a subordinate motion of the larger motion of giving them more time. Because currently their construction completion date expired in January. So I think your idea is great. I think that if we attach that to an extension of time, that we can make a package where the developer has an opportunity to get his feet under him with respect to this project and give us some good timelines, but it sounds like now is not the time he can do that either. So I guess the question perhaps to Attorney Jane or to Mr. Santullo is, would a year extension of this completion date with some sort of, benchmark come back to us, in 6 months and tell us what the deal is, so we're not surprised when you come back a year from now and say nothing has happened? Is that the sort of timeline that feels comfortable?
I think that's perfect.
So I would suggest that Jim's motion be a part of that larger motion, dealing with the fact that their subdivision approval is expired and needs some timeline attached to it.
I was gonna say just like that, Claudia.
So, Jim, do you want to amend your motion to be that?
Yes.
As stated.
So you're talking about extending the completion date
Yeah,
until
to a year
December
from-
31st, 2024?
No, well,
No, it would be a year from now. I think
A
that.
year from now?
Yes,
Okay.
and then, April 1st, how about that?
I like that.
April 1st, 2025, and then Jim's suggestion of sending us a letter saying, okay, I'm mobilized, I'm ready. And probably, I don't know, 2 months prior to the end of the completion date, if we haven't heard from you, maybe you should touch base with us. Like, perhaps not come in after it's expired, but let us know maybe 2 months in advance if more time is needed.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
makes sense.
Beautiful. Okay. So that's all part of Jim's motion, right? And that's all part of my second.
All right, and just a little more discussion on the motion.
Sure.
Did you say you have 2 projects that you're starting now?
Yes.
Okay, and how big are those projects?
One's a 7-unit, and the other one's a 3.
So,
are they individual houses? Or one building with 7 units?
The one building with 7 units, and then the other one is 3 separate.
okay, so
Like a
that's
3
4
lot
units.
subdivision.
So you feel pretty comfortable that you'll be able to complete those 2 in a year?
Yeah, I think in a year, I can get a plan
Well, I'm
for how this is gonna go.
Only asking because our history hasn't been that good up to this point.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you'll be surprised, I've done a lot.
I don't want-
I've done triple as many houses as this is, and
I may
since
not
I
be
started
back
working
here
here,
for the,
that's for
you
sure.
know, I may not be back here when you finally
Since
complete
16,
these
I
2
built about
projects.
30, so.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor to extend the completion date to April 1st with a contingent on there that 90 days before any construction is actually done, we get notice. Does that sound right, Jim? Yes.
And that if a further enlargement is needed, that 60 days prior to the expiration of the construction completion date, that we would be approached, we would get written notice, an email, a call,
Yeah.
something, letting us know where they are.
So that's the motion on the floor. No, any discussion? No discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? 7-0 carries.
All right,
Thank you.
congratulations on settling that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you
Good luck
all.
and everything.
Surely.
Care of it.
Okay, so I don't see any planning board update. Maybe it's because Tina's leaving, she just
Yeah, I'm gonna start
doing one.
shirking stuff now. So I have 2 things, though, I could give you verbally.
Oh, please.
One is just to let you know, as I used to do, and might as well keep going this evening, your next meeting on the 26th, the only business item at the moment on that is Sherman Terrace. There also may be 1 or 2 A&Rs. We've had contact with a number of people, and they've sort of partway through the filing, so You might have an easy meeting for your first meeting. The second thing, and even more important than that perhaps, is I wanted to reintroduce a gentleman who has served in this role that I'm currently in before and will be assuming my position when I leave. Mr. John Cashel is here, and I offered to invite him to come tonight, address the board, say hello, hear from you, but really kind of see how we operate.
So what do you think, John, huh?
Yeah.
You think it was before?
I'll come back.
Is that what you're gonna keep it down to, John, during the meetings, or? Okay.
Mr. Doherty, the chairman of the planning board, no one can ever predict the future.
No, absolutely.
Well, it's been a while. I'm back. I hope you appreciate my return, and I will work as hard as possible. And when I'm done with my position, I hope that Claudia has the words of praise that she bestowed upon my predecessor.
Yeah. Yes, if you do, you've got a gift.
I know I have big shoes to fill, and I will promise you I will be well-behaved, and I will conduct myself in a highly professional manner. Is that a deal?
Absolutely.
Okay.
John, welcome.
Thank you.
We are looking forward to working with you, John.
I just left, just to give you a briefing, I did leave Hudson, New Hampshire, 7 years ago this month. I was with Hudson for 16 years. Hudson, New Hampshire, surprisingly, even surprising for me, received the honor of being the 4th highest rated community in the United States to live in. And I felt I had a lot to do with that. Not to brag, but, you know, we got a lot accomplished in that community. It's a great community. I learned a lot up there, a great deal, and it really enhanced, you know, the knowledge and experience of my career. And the last 7 years I spent as the town planner in Georgetown, Massachusetts. And, you know, once I got a sense of what Georgetown was all about, you know, and I got calls from the public always asking about Georgetown. And I said, look, drive around Georgetown. Who wouldn't want to live in Georgetown? That's how nice that community is, and all the communities of the North Shore in that region. I served as a commissioner with the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission for the 7 years. I was on the Economic Development Committee, the Housing Committee. I was kind of doing all of wearing all of the hats for the community of Georgetown on a regional basis. And that was a very fulfilling experience, and it's a wonderful area of Massachusetts to have worked in, and I really enjoyed my stay there. And in the last several months, with the new mayor, and I supported the new mayor, and I don't want that to be any secret. I think people know that I did support him. And I was surprised. Mike asked me if I'd like to come back. And I said, I certainly would. You know, I'd like to have a short commute. I was 23 years in exile, basically, and I'm back. So if anybody on the planning board would like to meet with me up in the office anytime, doors open, and I'd love to have some conversation with you. I have a lot of brushing up to do, and I've had a wonderful time the last couple of days working with Tina. She's bringing me up to speed with as much as possible in a quick manner. I only have a couple of days left with Tina. Casey Hegarty, incredible professional. She has a lot on her plate. She's doing a wonderful job for the city of Woburn. I read about all of this stuff. I still live here, and I have my entire life. And Karen's just doing a lot of work for the planning board. And I really do feel, watching tonight, that this group is on pretty much automatic pilot. Everybody's been here a long enough period of time. You all know what you're doing, and you asked a lot of astute questions. I really loved the debate and discussion tonight on the mural issue. Dave, you took so many words out of my mouth about the artistic and historical significance a lot of these paintings have become, and one of them in Somerville is one of my favorites of all time, and that's it has to be historic. It's a Coca-Cola mural advertisement it's one of the largest brick facades in Somerville, and it's beauty to behold. The thing is with art, in what was talked about tonight, it's all in the eye of the beholder, and you really never know what's going to come of allowing murals. Hopefully, being optimistic, it will be a great experience. I really want to bring up one subject, and I'll stop. Many years ago, Woburn used to have Sears and Roebuck's, and it's downtown. After it met its demise in the late 60s, in 1970, when we were in the throngs of the anti-Vietnam era, there were a lot of young people in Woburn, and I'm sure people remember this mural, but they all got together, and there must have been 50 of them. And Dennis White was one of the leaders of that artistic group that painted the most fantastic mural that could have been painted depicting what was going on during that era of historical significance for the United States. And I lived right down the street and witnessed, the group of people, there were 50 to 100 people there for many nights, and they worked really hard on that. And it did turn into what I thought, and reflect back on, a very significant, important era of a lot of young people of the day coming together to voice their opinion of what was going on through art. And, contrary to what, some people may believe about this mural culture, it does bring a lot of people in a community together. And it can be a very significant improvement to behold, I believe, if it is allowed to take place. That's it.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
Yeah.
Sorry I talked so long. No, that's okay. I think we're used to it. We get the minutes from February 27th. Go ahead. Huh?
February 27th, meeting minutes.
For discussion, just to note, if paragraph 2 reflects that I was there, I was absent that meeting.
Thank you.
But in spirit, you were there.
So I have the motion to accept the amended draft.
I'll second.
Second by Mike. Motion by Jim, second by Mike. All those in favor? 7-0 carries.
6, one
And-
amending, one
Oh, 6.
abstaining.
After 9 o'clock, I can fade. So, it is now 9:13, and I'll entertain a motion. We have to sign some of those things. Yes.
I would make a motion to adjourn Tina Cassidy's very last evening meeting ever in her career at 9:13 p.m.
Motion by Claudia to adjourn this very melancholy meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Dave. All those in favor? Say aye. 7-0 carries.
All right.
Wow.
Thank you.
It's-
That was that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.